Time to kick off our Bears mailbag here on Chicago Bears Now. Following the firing of Matt Eberflus, I'm Harrison Graham. Buff Carter official says, I feel Josh McCown could be a good coach for Caleb. So he's the quarterback's coach in Minnesota. He's pretty highly regarded in the NFL. He's had the Texans almost made him their head coach a few years ago when they ultimately, I think they promoted Lovey, and then the next year they hired D'Amico. That feels like a leap. Obviously, he played in this organization, but could it be an offensive coordinator candidate if you hire like a CEO type of coach? Because that would be an upward move from QB's coach to OC. So I think McCown's a name to monitor. I could see the Bears interviewing him as a head coach candidate. Wouldn't be at the top of my list, but obviously did some good things with the Bears as a player, pretty highly regarded as a future head coach. I just wonder if it's a little too early for him. What say you? Who should be the Bears head coach in 2025 and beyond? Is it Thomas Brown, who's getting the opportunity to be the interim head coach right now? You guys let me know. Bears head coach 2025. Who is it? Drop his name down in the comments section below. Travis Burke, excuse me. I had Thomas Brown in my mind. I'm sorry if it's been asked already, but what about Bill Belichick? Bill Belichick, I think you should interview him. He wouldn't be at the top of my list. Obviously, he's a legend, all that stuff. I thought things ended really poorly in New England without Tom Brady. His resume without Tom Brady is questionable. He's 73 years old. I'm not saying he's not an option. I just don't know if he's my top option. Also, it's pretty likely he'll bring Josh McDaniels with him as his OC because that's his guy. He's not very personable. Like, is that the guy you want to pair with Caleb? I don't know. Again, I think you should interview him. You should definitely do your background there. I don't know if this is the right fit for Bill, though. Soldier Bear 85. Who calls the offense now? It's going to be Thomas Brown still, unless they announce something differently. But I think the Bears, I actually like what they're doing there. They're just throwing the kitchen sink at Thomas Brown. Hey, here's a 5-week audition. We're impressed with what you did, taking over play calling on the fly. Now you're taking over the whole thing. You're the head coach. Keep calling plays. Move down to the sideline. Lead this team. See where the chips fall. That's what they're doing here. Augustine, do you think Ben Johnson has inherited a little bit of Dan Campbell, making him an aggressive candidate? I mean, I would hope so, right? You can't force your personality, but I would hope that just, that aura, that leadership that Campbell has rubbed off on Ben Johnson. I think it's definitely rubbed off on Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator. He's a pretty big alpha guy as well. I think he's a guy worth interviewing. Defensive guy, so it gives me pause, but I think he'll be on the list. But yeah, I would hope so, and I think that's what you have to figure out because I like Ben Johnson a lot. He'd be near, if not at the top of my list, to be the next Bears head coach. But can he lead the room? Can he galvanize the entire team? Or is he just this fun, creative play caller? Because some guys are just that. They're just really good coordinators. So if you're going to go the coordinator route, which unless you fire a couple of options that have been head coaches before, you really got to do the deep research, press these guys hard in interviews, and figure out if they can handle being that guy. Are you glad Matt Eberflus is gone? If you are, like this video. Hit that thumbs up icon if you are glad that Matt Eberflus is no longer the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Check out our sponsor, PrizePicks. The best daily fantasy sports app in North America is PrizePicks with more than 10 million users and counting playing, available in more than 30 states. And it's awesome because I've been playing season-long fantasy forever, but some years just don't go your way. You have injuries, you have a poor draft, whatever the case may be, you have some bad luck. PrizePicks is daily fantasy. New lineups every day. You can pick different players. You don't have to be stuck with a team that's filled with injuries. And it's really simple how it works. Number one, you got to sign up. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS. Use the code CLNS to create an account today. And that code CLNS will get you a $50 bonus when you play for just $5. Doesn't matter if you win or lose. Then start creating your lineups. This is the 2-player lineup I have for this weekend in football. Jaden Daniels, less on his passing yards. He's been trending down a bit. Bo Nix, I've got more there. He's been trending up. 5 to win 15. But again, if you're a new customer and use our code CLNS when you create an account, you're going to get a $50 bonus regardless if you win or lose your first $5 entry. So check that out today. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Use the code CLNS. Play daily fantasy with PrizePicks. Ben Seaton, if they bring in a whole new staff, with a brand new head coach? Would you keep Thomas Brown on staff since him and Caleb seem to be connecting well? I think you got to leave that to the head coach. I think you hire the head coach and he brings in his staff. That's what I believe in. I'm not saying polls can't help conduct interviews for assistant coaches or whatever, but what you can't do if you don't keep Thomas Brown as the head coach is say, hey, Ben Johnson or whoever, you're our guy, but by the way, you have to keep Thomas Brown. I'm not a believer in that. I like Thomas Brown. If he's a part of this moving forward, whether it's as the head coach or something else, I'd be all for it. But you cannot force that onto the next guy if it's not TB. And let's face it, Thomas Brown, if they don't choose him, especially if he does well here, he might take that as a slap in the face anyway. He might say, oh, you don't want me as head coach, but you want me to stay on as an assistant? Nah, I'm good. I'll have other opportunities later. So let's see how this 5-week period goes with him. I think he'll get a head coach interview with this team regardless, and we'll see where it goes from there. Coco Monkey says, is Robert Saleh a good DC for next year? I'd be open to it. It'd be a scheme shift, 4-3 to 3-4, so that's something to consider. But, most defenses are multiple these days, so I don't think you can cross off 3-4 guys. I think you got to be open to everything. But I would say this, especially if you have a first-time head coach, it'd be nice if one of your coordinators is a guy who's held the job before. Even if it's a guy in Saleh who failed as a head coach, he still brings in those experiences. He was great as the Niners DC. Their defense fell off a cliff once they fired him, by the way, in New York. And really, the Niners' defenses, they were good with D'Amico still, but since Saleh and D'Amico, their defenses haven't been as good the last couple of years. DC Viper, what players under contract get possibly cut or traded in the offseason? Name that keeps coming to mind is Edmonds. You don't save a lot of money if he's a pre-June 1st cut, so keep that in mind. Let me look at the exact numbers here. Obviously, the big one all season was Nate Davis. They already did that. That's going to save them like $9 million next year. But if they cut Tremaine Edmonds, let me see for the cap. Do this on the fly here. I'm going to do pre-June 1 versus post-June 1. Pre-June 1 for next year, you save $4.3 million, dead cap at $13 million. That's a big number. Post-June 1, you save $7 million, you eat $10.6 million. It seems more likely you're going to have him for one more year. Maybe a new voice can get more out of him because for what he's paid, he's a pretty average player. So you might just have to stick with him for one more year. If you cut him, I would imagine it's a post-June 1 cut, but who knows? A new voice in here might just say, hey, well, let's just eat the money and get him out. Who knows? Philip, appreciate the question. Harrison, how do Warren and Poles pick the right coach and avoid this insanity every 3 years? The vicious circle needs to end. Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's always a little bit of luck involved when you hire a coach, but I'm also a believer in you create your own luck, and if you do the proper research, if you know what you're looking for when you interview people. I interview people all the time as potential new hires here at Chat Sports, and there's a few things I look for. One is confidence. Another one is just energy. Like, how engaging are you? We interviewed a guy recently that said about 3 words in his answers for every question we had. We had him blocked for an hour, and 20 minutes in, the interview was over. Seemed like a nice guy, but it's like that's not convincing me. So, you got to be able to carry a conversation. You got to be able – I don't think it's hard, and I think producer Cullen would agree with me here. When you talk to somebody that you've never met before, especially in an interview setting, you'll know within about 10 minutes, if not sooner, if this is a guy that can hold a high leadership position. So I think it's kind of you know it when you see it. And I think they feel some of that with Thomas Brown, which is why he's getting this opportunity. But you got to look for those leadership traits, and we'll see if they can find those when they look for this coach. Billy, any thoughts on Kellen Moore? He'd be on my list. Let's see. He's been around a while. He's worked with a lot of different quarterbacks. I think he's found Jalen Hurts, what he does well again. They've taken the pressure off. Now they have an awesome offensive line. They're leaning on Saquon. Hurts isn't having to do as much. So, it's a little different dynamic, but he'd be on my list. I like Kellen. Mason Robertson, what is the best draft situation for next year with how the rest of this season goes? Well, clearly with Thomas Brown, like you're trying to win games here. Like, let's just get that out of the way. But I think you get a high impactful trenches player, whether it's offense or defensive line. That's the ideal first round setup. And then whichever one you don't get, you go the other route on day 2. You can't force picks. Like, if you're picking at 41 and the best lineman available is 56 on your board, you can't force that. Maybe you trade down. Maybe you take best player available. You still got to be open-minded, but you got to get better in the trenches. That's very clear. Kobe White enjoyer. I agree. Do you think the defense played worse and gave less effort in these last few games on purpose to try and make Eberflus look worse? I don't know if they conspired with each other. Like, hey, let's kind of mail it in and make Flus look worse, because your tape is your resume. You can't just completely do that. But I do think like the over the top hustle was gone. The hits principle became the shits principle pretty quickly after Washington. I think the defense will play better against San Francisco. I really do. I think they'll have a burst of energy. And I'm not saying they'll get back to being a dominant group or anything like that. You still have some guys injured, but I do think that this will provide a spark there. Hit that subscribe button here on Chicago Bears Now. Thank you so much for helping us cross 110,000 subscribers here on the channel. We will continue to cover the latest Bears news, rumors, obviously coaching search. I mean, it's going to be a busy few months, not only for the rest of the season, but into the offseason. Critical time for the Chicago Bears, and we'll see if they can get it right this time. We're going to cover it every step of the way. Show some support. Hit that subscribe button.